Just because someone told you no uh, doesn't mean that's the end of the road. So always look for a second opinion.
Hi, my name is Blake Furman. I'm the founder for Veterans Navigation Network, a 501c3 nonprofit located in Billings, Montana, serving veterans not just here in Billings, but across Montana and beyond. Through this work, we've gotten to meet a ton of people doing great things for veterans, and one of those individuals is Amber Hofferber with Mortgage Solutions Financial. How are you doing today, Amber?
I'm doing great. How are you, Blake?
I'm doing good. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for being willing to talk to us about VA home loans. Before we jump into that, do you mind telling a little bit about your story and why you're passionate about working with veterans?
Well, honestly, I didn't really start specializing in VA till about 5 years ago. And what I realized was I was enjoying working with the veterans. I'd previously been married to a vet, and I can tell you that when he came home, I didn't know how to be helpful. And so I guess this is my way of now being helpful in a way which I know how to be helpful, and I do love helping folks that maybe have been told no before and maybe think that they don't deserve to use their benefits. So that's very rewarding for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get into kind of why everybody, or who's eligible for VA home loans and all of that, but can you maybe tell our listeners why you're qualified to answer some of these questions for us?
Well, let's see. I've been doing mortgages for about, I used to say 30, but I guess it's more like 40 years, and have a background in wholesale mortgage banking, and then own my own mortgage brokerage, and now work for Mortgage Solutions. And it's a kind of a unique family-owned company, and the owner is a retired Air Force colonel who, when he got out, had started doing loans, and then he said, "Hey, I'm looking at these VA guidelines, and I think we're doing a disservice to the veterans. Why is nobody taking the risk if VA says that they are going to insure this risk?" And so that really was one of his main goals in starting the company, was doing that. And so recently I was just at a thing where he was speaking, and he said, yes, these are riskier loans, and yes, we know that a lot of people aren't going to make their payments. He says, I write checks for those mortgage payments every month until I can get reimbursed by the VA. And then he said, so do you think I'm stupid?
Pretty blunt individual.
And he said, no, because we are giving them the opportunity that they deserve. What they do from there is whatever.
It's up to them, right?
Yes, yeah. It's the only company I've ever worked for when there was a first payment default. Nobody called me to give me a hard time.
Yeah.
They just took care of it.
Yeah.
And took care of the veteran and offered him options.
Yeah, well, that's definitely sounds like a good company to work for. Definitely appreciate you and your willingness to work with vets. Sometimes we can be hard-headed from one Army vet to, I guess, our watchers. But why don't we start out with the basics? Who qualifies for VA home loan?
So, of course, active duty military, but so if you served 90 days during wartime, or 180 days during peacetime, or you're in the reserves and you have, I mean, generally speaking, it's 6 years, but depending on if you're National Guard or Navy Reserve or whatever, I will tell you to obtain different documentation, because there's a point system, and you have to obtain a different, there's a different form for everything in the government. So, it's an NB 406, whatever. But yeah, we can establish that up front. And also the veteran who's just, at the beginning and wants to have some control over the situation can just go on. It used to be e-benefits, but now I think it's va.gov. They can go on there and get their own certificate of eligibility.
Yeah, so regardless whether they think they're eligible or not, they really could just get on to va.gov and look up and see if they have a certificate of eligibility for
Yeah, we'll do that when you apply for a loan, but why not get it yourself up front?
it. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think some people are having some issues with some of the logins for va.gov, so it's good to have a backup in case they
Right.
can't get it. But for those who can, I mean, you can get it basically instantly versus waiting a few weeks if you guys
Right.
order it.
And usually, we'll want to see your DD 214, get all that information off of there. And sometimes the information is incorrect when it first comes across, and we need to get it corrected. So that's all things we can take care of.
Sure. So, I mean, we know a little bit more about who's eligible. I think we can dive into that. But what really is the VA loan? Can you explain just more about what sets the VA loan aside from, or separate or apart from other funding?
Well, the one thing that everybody knows is there's no down payment. Much more lenient guidelines. Like I was saying, the VA doesn't set a minimum credit score. Now, does that mean somebody didn't go to a bank and get told no for a credit score? Yes, but I mean, we can talk about that. But there's more lenient guidelines. There's no down payment. You have no mortgage insurance. And usually it's going to be a little bit better rate than the going, conventional rate. The guy who has an 800 credit score and 20% down, may not get a better rate than you. Now, credit score does affect your rate, but yeah, the VA loan is great. It reminds me, we call them story loans because you can do them the old-fashioned way because life happens. And so if you can tell me what your extenuating circumstances were that created these situations, we can put it together in a way that meets VA guidelines. So a lot of times you'll have a veteran who changes jobs a lot. So the job history can be challenging, or if you just got out of the military and you've started what seems to be a new career, well, we can tie that into your training in the military, and all of that counts for work history. Debt to income ratios, basically VA has no guideline. Ours is up to 65%, but the VA loan is based on your residual income. So they look at, based on what your monthly payments are, do you have enough money at the end of the month for your macaroni and cheese and Kool-Aid, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I mean, credit score is not, it can be an issue, but people, regardless of their credit score, should still look into the loan if they're looking at,
Right.
making a purchase of a home.
I always say let's start somewhere, because sometimes if someone comes in, if you come in 6 months earlier, you can usually address any issues. You can start to prepare for the home loan. Mainly what VA is looking at is, have you made your housing payments on time for the last 12 months? So is your rent paid on time? If you don't have any credit, do you have 2 other things that you've paid on time? Your cell phone bill, your insurance, something. Usually, if we can piece those things together and make a story of it, it works. Now, if you never pay anything on time and you were recently evicted, then it doesn't matter what your credit score is. You're going to have to get it together for 12 months first.
So even if somebody's in that situation, there's still hope. I mean, they can
Oh.
really work to make those payments, get that history. Basically, 12 months, is that the length of time that they need
Yes.
to do that for, to kind of show they've got life back on track?
Yeah, so if you can get with somebody and get some direction, and you think in a year you want to buy a home, there's almost nothing we can't overcome. I mean, even if you're in a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, if you've made 12 months payments on time, you can get a VA loan.
Are there times when the VA loan isn't necessarily the right loan for a veteran who has that option to purchase a home?
I would say The only times I would say don't use a VA loan if you're a veteran, like I just did a loan for someone. I had done 3 home loans for them before, and I didn't realize that the gentleman was a veteran and was receiving 10% disability, which means if you are receiving disability, there's no funding fee. So there's a funding fee on a VA loan, and if you are not receiving any disability and you could go another route and not pay the funding fee, then I would steer that person into another kind of a loan, depending on their credit and which loan they would fit into.
Is that funding fee kind of a set amount for a loan, or what should people expect to pay
Yeah.
on that funding fee?
The first time use is 2.15% up front. That's not out of pocket. They basically add it on to the loan and finance it. And then subsequent use is 3.3.
3.3%. So first time a little over 2%, second time a little over 3%.
Right, and then on a refinance, like if you're doing an interest rate reduction loan for a veteran, it's just 0.5.
Okay.
And so also if you have already put in you're trying to get your benefits, I don't know if you call it an application or is that what you call it?
Yeah, like applying for VA disability compensation benefits.
Right. So as long as you've applied before you go and get your loan, and then let's say we fund your loan and then you are awarded your disability, you can get that funding fee refunded back to you.
Okay. That's definitely definitely something I did not know. So even I'm learning some things as we go here. This is more maybe just your advice as a lender, but when people are starting to make like that home purchase, maybe it's the first time they purchase, they've always rented. I mean, how much money, even if they are using the VA loan,
Right.
Don't necessarily need to make that down payment, but how much money do you recommend people have kind of saved up before making that home purchase?
Well, there's 2 pieces to that. Yes, no down payment is not no costs. So there are loan costs. You know, and theoretically, you shouldn't have to make an earnest money deposit with your offer, but in a competitive market, you're going to want $1,000 to put towards earnest money. We can give that back to you at closing. But for the actual transaction, you'll want the earnest money deposit. And then closing costs are usually about another 3% of the loan. Now, if you're working with a realtor who understands VA, basically they make the offer with seller concessions. So basically they just up the purchase price and then the seller pays all those closing costs. So there's no money out of pocket. Do that all day long. But do I recommend getting into a house when you have $38.52 in the bank? No, because homeownership is responsibility and you're going to be stressed out and then you're going to be angry at me. So
Yeah.
so if you come in and we're talking about if you're going to be a homeowner and your rent is $1,000, and I say, well, you know, you're going to double it because your average mortgage payment now at the current interest rate environment is around $2,000. So usually I'll recommend, why don't you, at least for 6 months, take that extra $1,000 that would go towards that new housing payment to make sure that you can do it, that you can budget, and we can always work on the budget. Go ahead and put that aside, get comfortable with that, and then also you're going to have those reserves because you really want to have, I would say 2 or 3 months of mortgage payments put away, because if the water heater blows up or, you know, you get in, you're going to want to paint, you know you're going to want a new couch. So, yeah, I mean, you want to be comfortable getting into the house. So yes, we can like, sometimes people will get pre-qualified and I'll say, well, yeah, you could actually buy a $500,000 house. Would I recommend it? No, I wouldn't recommend it. You know, you're going to be a lot more comfortable in a $320,000 house, you know, and then let's go out there with that number in mind because, you know, stress is not good.
No, it is not. This is something that I actually had to ask you not too long ago, but can you talk a little bit about the difference with like your mortgage payment, escrow, and then like homeowners insurance versus mortgage insurance, because
Right.
you mentioned earlier that the mortgage insurance wasn't required under the VA loan, but that's separate from homeowners insurance.
Right. So, yeah, the funding fee is kind of, what you're going to pay on a VA loan, but on a regular loan, if you don't have 20% down or even just going FHA, you're always going to have mortgage insurance. And that's money that doesn't go towards your principal, doesn't go towards your interest. It's basically just insuring the lender against default. And so that's going to be in addition to your monthly payment. Upfront mortgage insurance would be FHA's version of the funding fee, but yeah, so that's not great. But VA has no mortgage insurance, not to be confused with homeowners insurance. So homeowners insurance is part of your escrow items. You have to have homeowners insurance if your house is going to burn down. So basically that's part of the closing costs. It's what we call prepaids, is we're going to collect that whole first year's premium up front for your homeowner's insurance, and that's up to you to shop for. But right there, that's going to be probably in the $2,000 range. So that's one of the costs. So yeah, in terms of mortgage insurance, closing costs, so no down payment. When I talk about the other costs, those are all the costs of home ownership, and those are included in your monthly mortgage payment. So we're going to take the annual property taxes, the annual homeowner's insurance, divide it by 12, collect that every month, and we're going to pay that for you when it comes due, so that's just automatically taken care of.
Still ultimately up to the homeowner to make sure those things are getting paid, correct?
Right. Well, I always tell people to check their bills, because it's going to come in, it's going to be higher, you're going to maybe want to shop that, or you're going to call me up and say, my mortgage payment went up. And I'm like, your mortgage payment didn't go up, but your homeowner's insurance did. So maybe we want to shop that and get a little bit lower of a price there.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing that, depending on your income level, you can apply for the property tax exemption for disabled veterans if you're 100% disabled.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely something people should check in whatever state they reside. For definitely Montana, it's income-based. Other states, it is not necessarily income-based. So whatever state you live in, definitely our viewers should
Yes.
check and see what their benefit is for the state they're in, and definitely know that Montana can do better in that area as far as veterans benefits. Could you, something that we get asked quite a bit about is, can I use my VA loan to build or maybe buy like a multi-unit home where they could maybe rent one side out and live in the other side? Can you talk a little bit about those kind of
Yeah.
special circumstances?
And it's going to be specific to you and what you're buying. You can buy a multi-unit property and live in one. So as long as it's owner-occupied, you can do that. Now, we may or may not, most likely not, let you use the rental income from that property in qualifying if you have no experience in property management. There are ways around that, actually. In fact, I just heard this the other day. I was listening to another guy who does a bunch of VA, and you can, if you show somebody that you have a contract with a property management company, but you can use it to offset the mortgage payments. So that can be a really good deal. They are hard to find, and there is a VA renovation loan. I don't do them, and it's really hard to find someone who does do them. I also do not do VA construction, but it is out there. It's just a matter of trying to find who can help you with that. Because I always, when you're doing construction, I always tell people you should go with a local bank, because you want someone who's going to be able to cut the check to your contractors down the street, kind of a thing.
Right. So it is possible, but it might be a little bit harder to navigate the process and find somebody to advocate and do the loan with you.
And I'm always happy to try to direct people to whoever is doing something well. But if you don't do that well, you shouldn't be doing it. Actually, there are things that the VA offers if you can find them. Like I think you called me about the
Native American Direct Loan. Yeah.
Yes, they have the Native American Direct Loan for on the reservation, and I don't know if that worked out for you guys, but there are a lot of resources for veterans.
Right. Well, and I'll maybe close us out with a little bit of information about the Native American Direct Loan. But do you have any other kind of information that you want to share with our viewers? Anything we didn't cover that you think is important for them to know about the VA home loan?
So there, I think people can find it confusing because my niece came to me. She's in the Air Force and she was in Arkansas, and I said, well, why haven't you bought a house? I mean, you have a stable life. And she said, I can't. I'm working on getting my credit score back above 620, because she went to the bank and they said, you need a 620. Well, all lenders have overlays because they're either willing to take the risk on a particular loan, because most lenders are selling those loans off into the secondary market, and they don't like that risk, or they don't service their own loans. So just because someone told you no doesn't mean that's the end of the road. So always look for a second opinion, and when you talk to a lender, you want to ask them if they're doing VA loans, or recognize that if you're working with one of these online, big companies, I won't say any names, but it's just kind of a processing line. It's like a manufacturing thing, and so, you think everything's fine, and then you figure out you have problems. I often get calls of loans that fell out at one of these big lenders. I call them a rush rescue, and we can take that loan over and still get it done. So don't get discouraged if you go to the bank or somebody looks at your credit and then they look at you with that look. I always say, all interesting people have life events, which are sometimes reflected on the credit report, and we can deal with that, and the VA allows for that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that is good advice. I mean, if somebody is having, getting the no, just because one person says no doesn't mean the next person will. And so doing some research, reaching out to local resources, and just kind of finding out where is the best. And honestly, reaching out to other veterans who have used the loan before. Who did they use? Who did they have a good result with?
I think a personal referral is the best. If your friend had a good experience, especially if they have similar circumstances to you, either, there's all kinds of weird things that you can make work with a VA loan that you can't make otherwise, in terms of the way that you get paid, what looks like job instability, but in reality, you still have a job history, credit issues, debt to income. Because another super interesting thing is those seller concessions that pay your closing costs. You can use that money to pay down your debt to qualify for the loan. So if you know how to write that up, that any concessions allowed by lender. So a lot of times, maybe you get to the end of the transaction and you haven't used all of the money that the seller was willing to put towards it. You can take that and apply it towards debt, which also puts you in a way better situation starting out as a homeowner.
Right. Something you said earlier made me remember this question around manufactured home, trailer houses. Are those, either of those covered, or could they be covered under a VA home loan?
So manufactured homes have a little add-on on the rate, but as long as it's newer than 1976 and it's on a permanent foundation, you're okay with manufactured homes. Now, VA actually says they will do single wides. It's very hard to find a lender that does single wides. We recently added that overlay, so I have to get an exception for a single wide because I did a single wide in a floodplain, and now they're making jokes about that I do boat loans. So, yeah, and that's a case by case. So, for whatever reason, and it's kind of a bummer because manufactured housing is more affordable, but lending in general decided, I don't know, based on foreclosure rates, that it's a little more risky. And there's a few more steps in making sure that it was detitled. As long as it's being taxed as real property, you can get a home loan on it. Now, can you get a home loan in a trailer park where they can kick you off the land or raise your land rent? No, that's a car loan.
Yeah.
So, and also not the best investment.
Right. So you really need to own the property that whichever is getting put on or
Right.
being purchased at the same time as the home.
Right, as long as you own the ground underneath you, and I mean that's kind of the dream anyway, is everybody. Another thing you should know about VA, just because every veteran I know wants 10 acres and room to roam, that just needs to look like a single family residence with no income producing property, because VA doesn't want to do agricultural loans.
Mm-hmm.
So we just
So it's not an agricultural loan, it is a home loan.
right.
ultimately.
So as long as we find the value that way, we're fine.
And that loan, does it come directly from the VA? Or, I mean, I think you've kind of alluded to this and answered, but this will set me up for our closing with the NADL loan and the
Okay.
differences there.
Yes, no, VA does not lend you the money. The lenders are lending you the money, which is why they're putting the overlays on and deciding what risk they want to take with their money. The VA guarantees it. They basically guarantee 25% of the loan amount, and then they will cover the losses to the lender should you default or something else happen. So that's, and the VAs are very well-performing loans. So even though there's no down payment, veterans make their payments. So we like them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So if you are a Native American living on a reservation and are looking at the VA home loan, there are options there too, which is through the Native American Direct Loan. And that one is direct from the VA. There's definitely a lot more that goes into it as far as trust land versus, tribal trust land versus land that you personally own. So there's definitely much more. We could do a whole session on just the Native American Direct Loan. But if you have questions about that, questions for Amber or just around the VA home loan, you can always reach out to us at Veterans Navigation Network, and we're happy to introduce you to people who can point you in the right direction and get you taken away so you can use the benefits that you earn through your service. So thank you to all of our listeners and those who watched, and thanks to our veterans and those who are currently serving for their service.